Well, guys, welcome back if you've been here before, and if you're new, thanks for tuning in. It's Monday morning, so welcome to another episode of Monday Morning CAD. I figured I'd start out with an old file that I did. This is something I put together probably 10 or 12 years ago now. It was an entry into a competition for a tool company, which I ended up winning. And this is going back quite a ways. And this model, everything in this model, the tube work, the battery, the suspension bits, the fuel cell, wheels, tires, benches, everything except the motor in this model I programmed from scratch, which at the time I was super thrilled with, but my programming in the last 10 years has come leaps and bounds. And this is kind of what I'm working on today. Not just the design or the programming that's come leaps and bounds, but my design work into what I'm doing here. This is a current project with my buddy down at Backdoor Fab. This is a chassis we're going to be turning out soon. Off-road, race cars, front engine, rear engine, independent suspension, whole bunch of options. Kind of a pet project of mine. And this is actually the fire pit that sits in my front yard. It's probably been in the corner of a couple of videos. This is one that I designed for myself. Um, I wanted something really nautical. We live on the edge of the ocean, and I wanted to use some elements that were important to me. And I bring all of this up because the software can be used for so much stuff. CAD is recreational for me. Sometimes I just build stuff for the sake of building it. So, what I want to work on today is another avenue that I've been exploring a little bit lately, which is actually 3D printing. And with how cheap 3D printers have gotten, this is actually some parts that I'm going to end up making for my cars. I really like organized lines and such. You know, I want stuff that just kind of makes sense. And what we're going to start putting together here is actually frame rail clamps to control your lines. Now, of course, I know there's lots of stuff on the market. We can buy billet clamps, we can do all kinds of things. But really, over a couple of cars, I could go out and buy myself a 3D printer and it would pay for itself by the time I've built 4 or 5 cars just in building myself some clamps, which is something I've considered. I know I'm talking while, this is designing in the background, but realistically, there isn't a lot of work or explanation that needs to go into this. The Bolt model here, it was actually downloaded straight from McMaster Car. Their website is amazing. They have CAD models for so much stuff that's free to download. This just happens to be a quarter 20 socket head cap screw. It's an Allen head bolt. I like using them on stuff like this because it's just clean, and I wanted something to be able to throw into the model to represent what we're working on here. So what I've got here is, from left to right, we have a 3/8 fuel line, a 5/16 brake line, and 2 1/4-inch air lines, kind of representative of, say, what would be running along the driver's side frame rail, say underneath the driver here. And I wanted the bolt here so that I could kind of eyeball how everything's going to lay out. Obviously, I want to leave enough material between everything so that it'll still clamp, it'll still do its job. It's not just going to fall apart, getting beaten up on the road. So being able to actually throw the bolt into the picture to go, okay, you know what? I'm comfortable with this. It works. The line that I had drawn there was just to keep everything in line, because by the time I'm done, this clamp will actually be split in half so that you can put all your lines in. One bolt holds it into the frame. It just works. I had decided that I wanted 3/16 of an inch of material around everything, and No real logic to it, just that's the number that I decided I'd go with. Um, Now, if you're laying this all out yourself, the beauty of the CAD is that you can do pretty much whatever you want here. The reason that I want to do this is because I don't want to buy a universal clamp, so by the time the car comes for me to do all the plumbing in my car, I'll have a pretty good idea of what I need, how I want it. You know, maybe I need clamps that'll look like this. I'll need 4 of them, but then I only need fuel and brake line on a couple of clamps, or I just need air lines, or even just a single air line. Um, I could stay away from going with zap straps with something like this. And if I'm going to have them 3D printed anyways, it doesn't really hurt me to just make exactly what I need. So what I've done is I've made my layout in lines. I'm going to move the bolt out of the way here, and we're going to use the extrude command on the line work. I've used it before, but basically this allows me to work from lines, create a solid. I'm going to extrude it 3/4 of an inch thick, and then I'm just going to delete my line work because at this point I don't need it anymore. So I know every once in a while I throw up a video and I'm just glazing over stuff. I'm working faster than I'm actually talking here. Um, if there's something that I've missed, go into the comments, tell me. I don't mind clarifying. I don't mind making another video. You know, I want to turn out one of these CAD videos every week because I can, honestly. Um, what I'm doing right now is it doesn't want to grab the center of my block up top. I wanted to put my bolt directly in between those two hoses. So I've just drawn a couple of lines up to the center, extruding a cylinder, and I already know what my bolt dimensions is. It's a 1/4 inch bolt with a 3/8 head. So I can, and the head is a 1/4 inch deep. So if I extrude it a 1/4 inch deep, slide it down so that it's flush, I can go into my solid edit tools, use the difference command, and my second set of surfaces that I want to remove the material is the mock bolt that I just drew in the middle here. We hit enter and it removes my bolt from the middle. I've done this in a bunch of videos if you've seen these before. If not, I do this a little bit slower in some of my earlier videos. But as you can see, we have a block with 4 holes through it and a bolt hole through the middle. Now, I don't like the idea of just leaving it rough like that. There's no need to. We're printing it. We can print whatever we want. So if I go into the solid edit tools, I can actually click the fillet tool. And I want to radius over my top edges, the visible ones. I can go through and I can click fillet edge. I can select my radius of the fillet and hit enter, and it rolls everything over for me. I can do the exact same on the other side and it'll finish this out for me. Now, this is all aesthetics. There's no other purpose to radiusing it over. You know, I could say that it's so that I don't drag my knuckles across it while I'm working underneath the car on the side of the road in the middle of the night while it's leaking fluids all over me, but realistically, I just want it to look cooler. And it's on the inside of the frame, so realistically, nobody's ever going to see it. No. So the other thing here is, since I'm just using one bolt to hold this down, I like the idea of one bolt per clamp. I like putting pins on things when I design these. Now I've done it with aluminum and drilled out and pressed pins in, but we're 3D printing here, so I can just include a pin in my assembly. So all I've done is I've selected the cylinder tool. I've drawn a 1/4 inch pin that's a 1/4 inch deep. That's more than deep enough to get, you know, through my frame realistically. Move it off to the side, space it out so that, you know, it's a reasonable distance apart. It'll stop it from rotating. It also means that if you've got a perfect 1/4 inch hole in your frame, that inner pin should hold it into place so that you can put your lines up against it so you're not fighting everything all at once. I can go up into my solid edit tools and I can use the union command, which will join solids. and that makes it all one piece. And we'll go back into the fillet tool and we'll round over that edge. It just helps guide it into the hole in the frame. But now we have a solid block, which is exactly what we need. Except in our case, we need it split. We need it split in half. So what I'm doing here is, since we've got that all drawn out, how it needs to be clamped together, I'm just drawing a box with, I believe I put a 30-second thickness there, and we're going to type move, hit enter, grab it in the middle, and we're going to move it to the middle of our holes here. Now all of them are in lines, so when this splits in half, the lines will just slip in, and we can use the solid edit difference command again. And what happens is that's going to remove that slice out of the middle. Now these two pieces are made so that they go together perfectly. I don't need an alignment pin in there because the lines will be going through there. So realistically, there's not going to be anything to align. Once the lines are in there, it only goes together one way, especially when you've got different sized lines in there and they're spaced differently. So I can just leave it like that. That'll give us a little bit of clamping force so that the bracket will squeeze down on it, but not so much that I'm going to break my bracket crush lines. If we were to print this in resin, it would be extraordinarily, like, so strong. I've seen videos where they've talked about some of these new resin prints are actually stronger than metal. And I've seen some guys that test them like that. I don't know if I would trust it that far with my limited knowledge. However, for what I'm doing, I mean, this doesn't need to be anything fancy. All I'm doing right now up on the screen is I'm actually just drawing some lines through the middle of it because it's CAD software. It only takes a minute, and I like the visual representation of what's going on. I like to be able to see, okay, this is how this is going to look if we put lines through it. Sometimes I see something that I've missed. You know, if these were, say, rubber lines I was clamping instead of steel lines, you know, or plastic lines for my airline, I would probably radius fillet all the corners where they go through these clamps just so that vibrations can't cut into the rubber there. There's lots of little things we could do here, and it wouldn't really take much work. But all I've done is copy this. I've built some cylinders through the middle to represent our lines. And if we were to look up the inside edge of the frame, this is essentially what we could be looking at. We could space them whatever we want. You know, this is wide open. And what I'm trying to do here is show people that there are options out there that we can use. So let's just copy this whole process all over again. Let's make something that, honestly, it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine. All this stuff underneath the frame, you never see it. If you throw it up with zip ties, nobody's going to know. They'll hold, they work. We've been doing it forever. Under the hood, though, and especially on hot rods, rat rods, the stuff that I'm working on right now, where there's no side panels, no hood, you know, stuff is exposed. You want your engine looking good, and honestly, one of my pet peeves is seriously plug wires, which I wouldn't even want to hazard a guess how many hundreds of dollars I've spent on plug wire organizers over the years. I've had billet aluminum ones. I've had some that bolted down with my valve cover bolts. They bolted together. I've used the clip together ones. I've used plastic bolt together ones. I've even made them out of zip ties, and, you know, 5 zip ties, and you can loop a set of plug wires in a nice row. But I find that zip ties, I don't know, I always feel like they're going to cut into the plug wires. If I'm going to have a bunch of stuff 3D printed, I'm probably going to 3D print some plug wire separators, just like I'm programming right here. I'll set them up in sets so that I've got 4 3s and 2s. We could even set them up so they have an offset bolt hole, which is all something that we can program into here. The process is all the same no matter what we want. It wouldn't matter what size these are for. I've just set them up with a 5/16 through hole. Um, Again, this wouldn't matter. We're not concerned with exactly what I'm programming at the moment, because you could follow this exact process with your own measurements, your own layout. You could spread these plug wires out an inch apart from each other if you wanted to. You could do anything. And it's the exact same process that we just went through on the other stuff. Basically, I took my lines, I've extruded them. Um, we're drawing a line through the middle so that we can remove the area that the bolt needs to go through. It's the cylinder tool again, 1/4 inch bolt. It's got a 3/8 head for a socket head cap screw. It's going to be inset 1/4 of an inch. It's the exact same process that we just went through. Where we're going to change this though is that I want to be able to use a short bolt and a captured nut. So once we've removed this material here, we can see that there's our solid, same as the line clamps for the frame. We obviously don't need the pin on this one because hypothetically these would just be floating. But what I've done is I've gone over to the left side and I've grabbed my shape tool. It's already set up with 6 sides because that's always snaps back to what I use the most. And we've put it on the center there, and we've selected scale, hit enter, and we can select from the center to the outside edge, and it'll say what's your second dimension, and we want it 7/16 divided by 2 because 7/16 is the head size of a 1/4 inch bolt or nut. So I've set it up to that size. I'm going to extrude it 1/4 inch because it sounds like about the thickness of a nut. And we're going to use the exact same solid edit tool difference, and we're going to remove that extrusion from our plug wire separator. Again, if you're watching what I'm doing on the screen as I'm talking, this is all things that I've done quite a few times here. I don't want to oversize this one at all. I tend to oversize my bolt holes a little bit so that my bolts slip through, whereas this nut, we actually want it to press in. I've had a bunch of stuff 3D printed, and I found that if I print it to the exact dimensions I need, that hardware doesn't go, and if it does, it's a press fit. In this case, pressing the nut in there wouldn't be a big deal because we want it to hold into place. We don't want to undo it and have it fall off, but we want the bolt to slip through. And on this, I made my separating block here, 1/128th of an inch, because we don't want a whole lot of clamp here. I don't like squishing these lines down too much, so minimal clamp on this one. But it's the same process. We're going to go through, and I don't like the look of it with the raw edges like that, so we're going to use the fillet tool, and we're going to radius over those edges. You know, it's the same thing that I keep doing. You can see me selecting the sides. If I'm zooming in on something, I'm worried about details. I tend to open up the one window on its own. But if I'm working on something where I'm not trying to see fine details, I actually like to leave the 4 windows up on screen because that allows me to see it in all the different angles. I can tell where my pointer is. I can tell what lines I'm picking up. Earlier I'd said, you know, if it was a rubber line or something, I'd want to radius it over the edges that clamp down. This is exactly what I'm doing here, is I'm just selecting all of these so that I can radius these edges a little bit. This design isn't going to change much, I don't think, from what I'm putting onto my car, but it all depends on what engine ends up in this car. I'll probably make up a bunch of these, and when I have my buddy print them, or if I get myself a printer, I will print up a whole stack of them. My long-term goal would be to get myself a printer and actually print these up for market, because I know I personally would go through quite a few of them, so I would assume that other people would use them as well. But as you can see, Allen head bolt into the middle. We can see our area there where the nut would press in and the bolt would thread into it. It would all clamp together. But I mean, it took under 5 minutes to make this file. We could duplicate however many. If you had a straight 8, you want all 8 plug wires in one of these, we could do that. It's not a big deal. And it's amazing how fast 20 minutes goes, but here we are, and the last piece I've got there is actually a wiring clamp for, say, a wiring harness, so that locating pin, 1 bolt, clamp a wiring harness within a loom onto the frame. Just want to put it out there that these are things you can do. The sky is the limit when you're designing these things. So do me a favor. If you picked up anything in this video, subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment below, do the whole YouTube thing. Go out, try and design something. Grab some software, learn the functions. Once you figure out how it all works, the softwares are all pretty much the same. But thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next one.